RSIs. And I guess I want to start with just thanking the OHC for this opportunity and this day for all of us, because I think all of us are going to learn some very valuable and important information that we can take back for ourselves and for our members as well. I'm going to start with how I was going to finish, and that is just sort of outlining some very important responsibilities. And there are employer responsibilities and there are employee responsibilities. Employee responsibilities are obviously to perform their duties in the safest way possible. That is following policies and work procedures, wearing proper PPE, personal protective equipment. And then the employer responsibilities, a very basic form, is that they are responsible to provide the safest work practices and environment possible, and then make any necessary changes to improve those areas for workers. So what I'm going to talk about here today are, well, I'll start with two very important things, and that is document, 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 and report, report, report. And I'm sure you're going to hear that as a common theme throughout these presentations. The first thing is detailed documentation. So when an injury occurs, and it's a little bit trickier with the RSIs, as Rick had alluded to already, when the injury occurs, you need to document it right away. When you're feeling pain or discomfort, document it. Document what you're doing when you feel that. Document the first date that you feel that, the time when it happens. Any witnesses that may be there when you're reporting discomfort or pain, you have to document all those things. It sounds like a lot, especially when, as Rick said, RSIs sometimes just come as, they feel like everyday growing pains, especially if you're starting a new job, right? But you should be documenting that. I can give you an example of back in my young days when I first started in the packing house sector. I did a job, it was called leaf lard, and I don't want to gross anybody out. So what my job was on the kill floor was I had to pop the kidneys out of the fat and then lift the fat off the inside of the bellies of the hogs as they were going down.
Tell us the gross version.
I'd walk out of there smelling like PP and whatever else, right? So, but anyways, you know, after 2 days, I could feel my hands. So I was going home and I would sit down to watch TV. My hands would just freeze, like I was holding a tennis ball or a baseball, and it was very difficult to stretch them and move. And that was only after a few days. And I guess I was smart enough maybe at that time to go and report that to my supervisor. And luckily for me, I had a supervisor who had been around the block in the industry a long time. And he said that, yeah, a lot of people that do this job experience that. And he gave me some good advice. When you go home, take a tennis ball in your hand and just gently squeeze it a little bit. Not hard, just gently for like 10 to 15 minutes. Your hands will loosen up throughout the evening, and it worked. I did that for the first 2 weeks, and it worked, right? So luckily I had that advice. Not everyone has that, right? So it's very, very important to document those things, because when the injury does occur, WCB for sure is going to want as much evidence as possible, right? The employer wants as much evidence as possible. So you have to record all that and then report all that, so that you're safeguarding yourself and hopefully safeguarding future workers that will be doing the same thing, right? So that the improvements can happen. When it gets to the WCB part, it becomes very, very tricky. And as much as I'd like to say WCB is great and it's there for workers, I'm a little jaded in what I do and representing workers, and I don't believe that that's always the case, right? I believe that WCB is an insurance provider, just like other places are. And sometimes the focus, as Rick had mentioned, is let's review a claim and let's get this person back to work in some capacity. Employers love that too, because it reduces their WCB premiums. It's not advantageous for workers all the time. And believe me, I am a strong believer in good return to work programs, including modified duties, that are good for the worker to get them back to a healthy place to do the normal functions of the job again, right? Not simply to get them off the books so that we're not having to pay them. Reporting the injury, again, very important, and it's important for the worker to report the injury. I always say, if you can, write it out yourself. If you can't, ask for the assistance of a coworker, your union if you have a union, because that to me is one of the most key importance, because it's your injury, it's your story to give for that injury, not someone else's interpretation, right? And if you're sitting down with the health and safety supervisor in the workplace and they're the ones recording that, it's going to be a very different version from what you're really trying to intend it to be. So be very mindful of that. Once that documentation and that reporting is done, what that should do is trigger investigations in the workplace. Go review the work area, see what the work practices are, see how those things can improve, right? And the Health and Safety Committee should be doing that, and they should be reviewing all injuries in the workplace. The next step after that that documentation and reporting is done would be to contact WCB, and they should be receiving the same documentation and the same reporting from you, and the employer should have the same thing that you've already given them, so that should all match. And part of the reason is that you want to make sure that you're giving it to them, so it makes it easier to potentially argue an appeal in the future if it gets to that point. It's going to be your narrative and not someone else's, right? It's your injury. Once you've done that, I always tell members, you need to let us know, us being your union. We may not have to be involved, but if we have that information up front, we have the same documentation, the same reports and stuff, we put that in our file. If we need to take action or we need to provide advice, we have it, and we can direct you in the right direction, whether it's, go to the OHC, let's get the worker advisor office involved with an appeal or whatever the case may be. We have that, and we can help support you through that process. Once that documentation and reporting is done, the union knows about it now too. You need to get the medical treatment and advice. I always advise folks, it's your choice who your medical treatment comes from. You get to choose your doctor, your medical practitioners that you see. A lot of employers have their own nursing stations. They hire physiotherapy companies. They're going to try to steer you to go to the nursing station. They're going to try to steer you to go to their physiotherapist, because why? They want to control that narrative on your injury. They want to have the information to argue that it's something that hasn't happened in the workplace, right? Not all the time, but again, my experience in dealing with the employers that I have dealt with. And again, if you have your own medical documentation, it's going to help you when WC doctors review your file and stuff like that. You're probably going to have a conflicting report from your doctor that is going to help someone who may help you with an appeal or something down the road, make argument on your behalf. The other thing that, again, it's personal opinion, I have issue with employers using their own therapists, nursing stations, and their own third-party, I would say, claims specialists. To me, it's all about suppression, having workers' claims not proceed, and it's more red tape for the worker to navigate through when they're already dealing with a very difficult situation, right? Nobody wants to be injured. Nobody, doesn't want to go about their regular business throughout the day. Sometimes you can't even go grocery shopping, right? You're gonna have a private investigator monitoring you and saying, oh, they lifted a 5-pound bag of potatoes today, they're not supposed to lift over 2 pounds. You still have to live, right? You have to eat, right? So these are all things to keep in mind and why it's so important to have your own documentation and your own medical treatment. And again, like I said, there are return to work programs that are good and very successful. And I think that the worker and their union, if they have a union, have to be involved in that return to work process and outlining what the modified duties should be, what the hours of work should be to get that person back to their regular duties. Failing to do all those things, the documenting, that's not a word, why do I keep saying it? Documentation and reporting, it's only gonna lead to problems down the road. Oh my God, I'm getting a warning and I thought I wouldn't. It's gonna lead to problems down the road, and it's gonna make it more difficult to argue for a claim on your behalf. And I think the last thing that I wanted to touch on is that some workplaces do have ergonomic committees as well as health and safety committees. I think ergonomic committees are very, very important for workplaces. That's now you have co-workers that are able and do the job to be able to review and assess jobs and make their recommendations to improve the work that you're doing that will hopefully lead to no one being injured in the future. I think that is sort of my presentation, and I'll turn it over to Jeff again.